Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Conference Championship Week here at the Horsehead Weekly. We are down to the last four, the final four in this league, and it is a good week for football. It's going to be a lot of fun. We also have our six contenders for the in the fight for 50. Those have been chosen, and this is their first of their 2-week brawl. And then Jess and I are here too. So let's get started. Taking a look at what happened last week. We're going to start in the winners bracket, of course, because they are the winners, where we had Doug and Tyler both sitting out awaiting their opponents. Doug was awaiting the winner of Jerry and James, and Jerry ended up taking it in a very, very high-scoring affair. Both teams, really all the teams in the playoffs, showing that they deserve to be there. With Jerry almost putting up 150 and James putting up 130. So James, sadly, will not be cashing, guaranteed. He will have to currently fall down to the fight for 50, where if he comes in second, it's as if he came in seventh overall. So, hey, that's going to be fun for him to try to not come in second, because it'll just be fun. And then on the other side, we also have Mike and Matt M. And Mike ended up deciding that he wanted to win really bad and managed to put up 137 points against Matt M., who only put up 118, and thus was also knocked down with James into the fight for 50. In the consolation ladder, we had Nick and Mac. Those two were just kind of fighting for fun, so their scores really don't matter. Not going to put too much weight on them. But on the other side, we had Dave versus myself, and Matt S. versus Jess to see who made it into the fight for 50. And as I alluded to earlier, Jess and I did not survive the fight to make it in, and thus were eliminated. So congratulations to Matt S. and Dave. You have survived the first round of eliminations, and you will be moving on to the fight for 50. So let's see what the playoff bracket looks like now. So that means we have Doug facing the number 5 seed and the number 2 best team in the league according to standings. Couldn't figure out what that word was. Record. Jerry. And on the other side, we have the division winners, Tyler and Mike, facing off. So this will be a lot of fun. I'm really curious to see how this is going to work out. Because these are just 4 really solid football teams. So see how that goes. And then down on the fight for 50 bracket, on the left-hand side, as I said earlier, Matt S. advances and Dave advances. Mac and Nick had the bye. And on the right-hand side, James went the wrong way, as did Matt M., falling out of the guaranteed in the money spots and falling instead into the, hey, we're just kind of fighting 50 spots, which is not a bad place to be. I wish I was there, but there we are. Now, those aren't the only 2 ways. We only have 4 people guaranteed to cash. We have 2 people guaranteed not to cash in the fight 50 or in the winners bracket, but that doesn't mean you can't win. I am still fighting for incentives. That's right, I have an incentive I actually care about. And let's see how everyone else is doing with incentives. When we're going to start off with quarterbacks and running backs, as we always do. Just quick recaps here. Doug continues to add on to his lead over James. At this point, I think it's going to take a small miracle to catch Doug over 2 weeks. Because it's going to be very hard to find people who can put up 35 points a week at quarterback for the next 2 weeks. Doug could probably not start a quarterback the next 2 weeks and still take home that incentive. So congratulations, Doug. I'm just going to declare you the winner of the incentive now. But it'll be fun to see how everything works out later on. Moving over to the running backs, Tyler continues to dominate there. But after a couple shaky weeks as of late, he has let Matt S. and James back into it. And they are sitting pretty close. Dave was also in that striking range. And he still is. He could still definitely win the incentive, but he has a lot more work to do after a poor showing last week. Now, Tyler is at a bit of a disadvantage here because he is, of course, trying to actually win the league. So if Matt S., James, and Dave all want to have the best shot of taking him out, you could do what I was doing for a while when I was trying to get exclusively the wide receiver one, because I figured I was out anyways. I wasn't making the playoffs. Just start 3 running backs, because the top 2 will get it for you. And if you're not too concerned about the fight for 50, you got 2 weeks to catch them. And it's not doable, but it's going to be tough for you. So best of luck to you 4, and may the best person win there. Moving over to wide receivers and tight ends, it's basically a 2-man show for the wide receiver position. I was at one point duking it out up there, but then since then I've just kind of turned it to trash. And speaking of trash, Mike is number 1 in the wide receiver spot, and the only person I think really in striking range is Jerry. Because again, there's only 2 weeks left, so Malcolm would have to beat Mike by 20 points per wide receiver for the next 2 weeks. I don't think that's happening. I think this is a Mike and Jerry fight. So best of luck to those 2 at the wide receiver position, but I think Mike is the clear favorite at this point. For tight ends, it looked like it was going to be close between Matt M and Tyler, but Tyler just he looks like he's just he pulled away for a couple weeks, and Matt M did gain 5 points on him, but I think 15 more points than Tyler over the next 2 weeks is going to be very difficult. Same with Matt S being in that same position. So the Mats are definitely have their work cut out for them to catch Tyler, but we will see what happens. This was the week that Matt M could have put a bunch of a gap closing on with Tyler's Gronkowski being out, but he ended up finding a very good replacement. The second best wide receiver, or rather tight end, started this week, despite the fact that he had to sit Gronk and just pick someone up off of waivers. I don't know how he does it either. He's just fantastic at what he does. So that's probably setting. I don't want to anoint Tyler yet, but he is again the very, very strong favorite to win the tight end position, with Matt M and Matt S both needing about 15 points a week for the next 2 weeks in order to take them out. Moving on to IDPs. For defensive linemen, Matt S and Jerry both picked up a little bit of ground on James. James still is a clear favorite, but again, anything can happen here. James puts up a couple more clunkers like he did last week with his 3 points, and Matt S or Jerry just happened to strike gold and get somebody who puts up 15 points one of the weeks and then 10 points the next week. They can catch them. It's going to be not a great fight for that position, but best of luck to you guys at the top making that fight. But I'm pretty sure James is going to make that one. Linebacker, Dave. While having a bigger lead, linebackers tend to put up a lot more points, and the spreads tend to be a lot more crazy. As you can see with what happened last week, Dave and Jess were neck and neck, and then Dave put up 20, where Jess only put up 4. So, those could switch back and forth. I think Dave, Jess, and Jerry are all still very much in it, with Nick as a very, very dark horse. So, hey, we'll see what happens there. And then finally, defensive back, it is I am leading in the who's better, Landon Collins or Rashad Jones fight. Landon Collins is doing this thing where he is hurt. So I don't think I'm in a great spot right now. But, who knows? Anything can happen. Hopefully, my guy can beat Rashad Jones this week. Landon comes back the week after, puts up big numbers and seals it, and I can get $5 back out of this league this year. But yeah, so that's basically what's happening with the incentives. A lot of them are pretty much wrapping up, and there's a little bit of strategy to be played with them. But hey, we'll see what happens with those. Moving on, we have the waiver wire. And this week there was only really 2. I'm going to call them important pickups or crazy pickups. Kenny Britt was picked up by Dave for $18 because he really wants that $50, and he thinks Kenny Britt getting thrown to by this Tom Brady guy, whoever he is going to be good. But I don't think that's going to work out. But fun fact about Kenny Britt, he hasn't won an entire game this season, and is already guaranteed to go to the playoffs and win his division. I just think that's kind of funny. So yeah, good for Kenny Britt getting out of the garbage fire that is Cleveland and moving on to the Patriots. And hey, who knows? Maybe he'll get a ring after being on the Browns for 13 weeks. That'd be interesting to see. I don't want to see it because I hate the Patriots, but it'll be interesting. And Kerwin Williams because Adrian Peterson is out on IR, which means that Kerwin Williams is going to maybe be the guy. No one really knows. The Cardinals are just I don't know. Moving on. So this week's special session, I'm just going to keep it really short because not a lot of people care that much right now about the league because it's, we're in the playoffs and stuff like that. They just want to see where they're in the power rankings, figure out how the tournament's going along, and then just move on with their lives. So here's what we got for comparing positions. Basically, I looked at which position scores the most points every week, and according to starters, we tend to average about 20 points per game for quarterbacks, and they score the most points. And that's not a surprise. Everybody knows that quarterbacks are going to score the most points. It's just the way that fantasy football works, because you want to give 6 points per touchdowns or 4 points at least, and they score a lot of those, and they put up 300 yards. Not consistently, but you can typically get, a bunch of them to put up 300 yards in a given week. So, of course, they're going to be number 1. Number 2, we have running back, and number 3, close behind, is wide receiver, which is kind of what people would expect. Again, they're the most scoring players. They tend to put up big numbers of yards, somewhere between 70 and 100, and get some touchdowns and stuff like that for just kind of like the average guys. So, of course, those make sense. The interesting thing is that I noticed is tight ends. They're almost last. They're tied with defensive backs, and defensive linemen are a full, point and a half below anybody else. Which means I think we need to, if we're looking at these from a balancing perspective, I think a good idea for next year would be to buff defensive linemen and maybe look into buffing defensive backs if we can. I'm not entirely sure how. Maybe increase passes defended. Maybe make that 1.5 points. Defensive linemen, we can make stuffs something where if you tackle someone behind the line of scrimmage, so not a sack, but the running back gets the ball, you tackle them behind the line, or for like a minimal gain, something like that. I don't know how ESPN works it, but they do have that ability to use that stat. They call it stuffs, and I think that'll be really cool to do. And then for linebackers, I think they're fine as is. They're already competitive with running backs and wide receivers. And this 11.9 is people we've started this year, which means that if you look overall, if we had a better idea as who was better and worse, and we really were working the linebackers as well as working other players, I think it would make a lot more sense. Now, this is all cool and all to be able to look at this and say, oh, okay, so, these players score these many points, cool, but there's some more data you can work with, which is if you look at, on average, the best team versus the worst team every single week. So, for example, if you look at the way the incentives are set up, I have one of the worst running back teams. Tyler has one of the best running back teams. Well, on average, over the course of a season, how many more points did Tyler earn every week than I earned at the running back position? And he was putting up 13 points more per game than I was, strictly because of his top 2 running backs versus my top 2 running backs. Now, that is the biggest gap. So, if we want to make it, if we're fine with the way that is, then that's fine too. If we want to make it bigger, maybe incentivize people to take the higher up running backs versus the low running backs, I'm sure we could find something like if you score over 100 rushing yards in the game, you get a couple bonus points. If you score, some way or a different way, you can get bonus points. And I think that'd be a really interesting way to look at it if we want to incentivize going after higher end players versus lower end players. But then you have teams like Tyler, who has a ton of higher end players. Sorry for that. My computer needed to tell me there was a problem with my account. I don't care. Or we can go the other way with it and say, well, maybe we want to make it so that we're not incentivizing these all-stars as much, because 13 points is a lot of points for someone to get strictly from 2 starting positions. I mean, the same thing with quarterbacks. That's only one quarterback. So your one quarterback, if you have the best quarterback every single week, as Doug did, he's getting 10 points per game more than somebody who's streaming right now, on average. He's getting almost 11 points per game more, strictly because he's starting the best quarterback versus starting a quarterback who is just off. You're just streaming him. So there's a couple ways that we can work on this stuff. We can make the bench smaller. I think that will make it so that these differences are less because you won't have people who are sitting there holding on to a couple of running backs or something like that. But we already have small benches as it is, and I think the waiver wire has really shown that this year, where people are able to get really good value off of their money, and there's been some pretty good bidding wars when people go out, so people aren't really hoarding players that are maybes. So I don't think that's a good solution, but I don't know. I think this is something to really look at, and if nothing else, when you're drafting next year, this might make it so that people are looking at like your Gronks, your Ertz, your Kelseys, and they're saying, man, I need one of those tight ends because I'm going to be getting 9 points per game over somebody who's streaming. Or if you're looking at, the first couple picks, maybe you're going to lean on running back a little bit more because they do the difference between an elite running back versus a meh running back is so much bigger than the difference between an elite wide receiver and a meh wide receiver. So just some things to really consider and just kind of look at and be like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And this isn't great data. I didn't go through and look at like, okay, what's the average points per game for the 5th best running back in any given week versus the 25th best running back in every given week. I didn't do that. I just kind of looked at what we already had for numbers. So these numbers could be bigger, they could be smaller. I don't really know when you really look at the data. But I just thought it was interesting to look at and just say, man, it does really pay off to have a top-end quarterback. It really does pay off to have a top-end tight end, where for defensive linemen, I mean, if you look back at the last screen, they were averaging 7.2, and their difference is 5. So you're getting, you're not really getting a lot out of them. So I think increasing their numbers and stuff like that will help out. But, that's something to look at. Also for linebackers, their spread is only 6 points. So even though they put up a lot more points than some other positions, they're, I think, the 4th biggest point getter by a good margin. Their gap isn't very big. They're only putting up an extra 6 points versus the best versus the worst. So maybe it's not incentivized to go after a linebacker. Maybe you can just use them like you used to do kickers, where you just pick them up in the last round and say, okay, cool. If I hit, and this guy's the lottery ticket that ends up coming out great this year, then great. Otherwise, I can stream or I can do other stuff because it doesn't really matter. I'll punt on those 6 points to go after somebody else in the 5th, 6th, 7th round when other people are really looking at these top-end linebackers potentially. So just some food for thought, just some theories I have about what's going on, and just something to consider if you come up with any rule changes or anything like that you want to look at. Maybe there's something to investigate. But moving on from all that, let's look at the last 3 weeks and also the last 2 weeks, because I feel like both of those are very interesting numbers to look at the moment. Because we are down to this this last big push to to win the money, because you got to make that money. So let's see how it works. You got Jerry at number 1, and then James and Dave both kind of hanging out. All 3 of them having fantastic scores. And then you just kind of have this clump of Tyler, Matt, Mike, and Matt, and Doug. They're just kind of a little clump there. They're all very close to one another, which makes the game this week very interesting between Tyler and Mike, because over the last 3 weeks they've only had a difference of 0.7 points per game. Now, if you drop that last one of those games where Tyler did very poorly, and Mike also did very well, then the difference is a lot bigger, which is the last 2, which is why I included it, because it really does show the big difference that just getting rid of that 1 week makes. But yeah, so I think it'll be very interesting to see how everybody really shakes out this week. So, just some food for thought. And let's get into the rankings, just the Christmas edition, because next week I'm probably going to be just putting up something really quickly, just like, hey, here's an update on everything. Here's the power rankings. Let's move on. And then I'll make a big end of the year show, probably not right after, but probably, in a week or 2 after the season's done, that I'll put up at that point. So for the C-Class, we have the Figgy Pudding and Fruitcake, stuff that nobody really likes. And speaking of stuff nobody likes, it's all the players on my team. Man, I did not get lucky this year, and I continue to sit at last. I have terrible last 3. I mean, my team's just garbage. We all know that. So let's just move on to Malcolm. Again, his team is, it's just not great. It's not putting up big numbers, and I understand that you're going to say to me, "Oh, well, Mark, you're going to keep crapping on my wide receivers, blah 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 blah." Yeah. I'm also going to crap on your scat backs. I'm gonna say that Cam Newton's not great. Charles Clay's looks like he's not the same person he was when he left. Probably because there's another target for people to throw to in Buffalo that isn't him. So somebody remind me I said that in a couple months when I'm looking to draft Charles Clay early because I'm like, oh, he had this great start to the season, and he got hurt and he wasn't that. No, it's because they have more mouths to feed, and he was the only show in town before. But yeah, I mean, when you look at a team and it has 4 people on the Cleveland Browns on it, you know it's going to be terrible. 5 Cleveland Browns on it. Wow, dude, seriously, you got a problem. I know you saw this today, but you are aware that 3 Star Wars movies have come out since and only 1 win has come out in the same time frame. I'm just saying, dude. Moving on to Nick. Nick, I don't like your team. I really don't. I don't like Cooks anymore. I didn't like him earlier in the season, and he had a couple good games. I was like, well, maybe I should come around on him. But no, Martavis hasn't been very great because I think him and Juju are both kind of cannibalizing each other. Even with Juju being out last week, he still didn't put up good numbers. Mixon's hurt. Rudolph's hurt. You were all big on Bilal Powell for a while and Sterling Shepard, and they've just kind of been clunkers on you. So your bench is all in shambles. And then when you move up to your actual team, you got Jack Doyle, who's streamer quality. You got like Rashard Matthews and Chanu, and neither of them are like they have both like potential to just have like a big game out of nowhere, but Rashard Matthews isn't doing that anytime soon. And Sanu had his last week, so he's probably not. Maybe he'll get one this week. Who knows? I don't know. I just don't like your team. Your team's trash. I'm just gonna do hot takes and just move on quick. Getting gifts is definitely B class because everyone enjoys getting gifts. Speaking of getting gifts, Jess did not get a gift last week when she got eliminated, and she got knocked down to 9th from number 2 because I just couldn't sit around waiting for a team to get better again. I mean, Coleman hasn't been the same ever since Freeman got back, and I should have seen. I mean, everyone saw that coming. Alfred Morris is fighting for work with Rod Stewart, who, you know, what? I mean, that's just a thing that's happening. You still have a fantastic defense, but I mean, you got issues with your tight end Jordan Reed being out on IR, which is something that everyone just kind of assumed was happening at some point this year. And it finally did happen. LeGarrette Blount is no longer good because he's dealing with all the nonsense. Amari Cooper's hurt. He's probably not. I believe he's already been ruled out for this week. So you just kind of got hit with some issues. I mean, your team was good for a while, but then the wheels all just kind of fell off at once, and now you're struggling. And I mean, you're not struggling. You're dead. You're like me. We're both dead. So sorry, Jess. My hot take on your team is. Better luck next year. Matt M. Starting a player on IR is a bold choice, but when it's Aaron Rodgers, you got to assume he's going to put up points even when he is absolutely broken. I mean, the fact that your team went from having one of the best quarterbacks this season playing and starting every week in Carson Wentz, who you got off of waivers after I traded him to Doug, and he dropped him because Doug's an asshole. He gets hurt, and you're thinking, oh no, my season is over. This is terrible. How can I possibly win the fight for 50 without my quarterback? It's by having one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time on your bench coming back the same week your other one gets hurt. So I don't want to hear any boo-hoos from you about, oh, Carson Wentz. You can complain because you're an Eagles fan. That's fine. I completely understand. You're probably still winning the Super Bowl with Nick Foles or whoever you have kicking the ball or throwing the ball or whatever quarterbacks do. But that's just the thing that's happening, just so you're aware. But the rest of your team, I mean, how good is Ertz going to be with a backup quarterback? He's probably going to be better. Okay, so that's cool. Starting him and Jeffrey, I don't think you have I don't think Foles is going to be able to support both of them. So I think you kind of have to pick one and hope for this week, and then you'll know which one is going to be his favorite for next week. Mike Evans has just been trash because their team is trash. Same with Gio. Yeah, he's doing good, but he's also hurt, and you might get Mixon back, and that whole situation is just garbage. McKinnon's in garbage nonsense as well, and just got beat by the garbage rocket. So I guess my hot take for this team is garbage, 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 and good job on having a backup quarterback that's as good as anybody else in the league. Moving on to Matt S. Matt S. God, how your team, like the names are so good. Like you got Dak, Gurley, Hyde, Jones, Tate, Kelsey, and then you have, it's crazy. It's crazy how good those names are. And then on your bench you have like Carr and Benjamin and Woodhead. Like my Cobb even. Like your team is stacked with good names, but they just weren't able to put it together for you this season. And I mean, that's what cost you last week, right? Were you the one who lost the mic? Maybe you're the one who lost the mic. Maybe you're the garbage boy. I don't know who the garbage boy is. I can't remember stuff. Moments of silence are when I'm drinking. There we go. Refreshing. So yeah, no, it's just the names and the numbers next to those names, like Gurley being the number 1, Hyde is 9, Julio is 6, Kelsey is 1. Like your team should still be in the playoffs, but it's not. It's dead. And it's kind of crazy to me, but I'm sorry, dude. That's just how it happened to go this year. Yeah, you were the one who lost to Mike last week. So sorry to Matt M for getting your hopes up that you actually accomplished something last week. In the winners bracket by losing, you actually beat Jess last week, I believe. It was because Nick got the bye. Yeah. Whatever. I'm rambling about nonsense. Hot take. Great names bring pains. I don't know, dude. I'm sorry you lost last week. Your team was great, and you're definitely a big-time contender to win the 5 for 50. In the A class, we have family, and I found this cool stock photo picture of families giving thumbs up. That's if you like your family. If you hate your family, then, yeah. Cool. This is on the internet forever, so I'm not going to say things. And we get to Mike. Mike, congratulations on advancing. You're in the Final Four. And yet you're only 6 where you're going to stay with the 6th place last 3 because you're in that clump. You made some good... I think you picked up Micah Hyde off of waivers this week. And so, you're definitely making moves trying to make your team better. And I think that's definitely going to be an upgrade for you. And I mean, basically, your team lives and dies with a couple of, like, really big things happening. Like, if Kerwin Williams is the guy... which it was, and it hasn't been, and then it was again. Who knows what's going on in Arizona? If he's the guy, then you could beat Tyler this week. That's entirely possible. You have Roethlisberger throwing to Antonio Brown against it's a better New England defense, but at home, not in prime time, which is a shame because honestly, how is this game not in prime time? What game is in prime time? Oh, that's right, Dallas at Oakland. 2 teams that are probably not making the playoffs. They get the night game, but heckin' Ben Roethlisberger versus Tom Brady in Pittsburgh, that's a crazy good game. That should be the primetime game. But whatever, I guess they didn't want to give Brady 2 primetime games in a row for some reason. Rant over. But yeah, your team is looking great. You got a lot of really good players, and I really think you can take it to Tyler this week. You just really are the type of team that needs... just a couple breaks, and your team can just go off. Like you have Latavius Murray, who he put up 3 points last week, but then he can just come out and be like, "Oh hey, I'm Latavius Murray, and I'm going to play like a good football player for a couple weeks." So basically, moral of the story is, you got a great team, you're putting up big points, keep up the good work, and let's see what happens. I don't have hot takes once you're above A class because at that point you're so much better than me. I feel like it's not worth it. Tyler moves up to 7th, leaping over Mike because of his great performances. Yeah. I mean, he's starting Blake Bortles, and he's forced to sit Leonard Fournette, which is just really sad, but, we'll see what happens. His team is still absolutely insane, even though he does have some players that he's starting that aren't in the top 3 at their position like he had forever. But yeah, his team's great. I think it'll be a really close match against Mike, and it'll be a lot of fun. Moving up to number 4, we have Doug, who is number 4 for now, but last week he put up really bad numbers. Again, he didn't have to care because he wasn't playing against anybody. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how his team shapes out for the rest of the season. Will he be the first person to come in brand new and win the championship? Or will he just be some person who ends up losing everything and coming in like 3rd, 4th? Or will he be the person who faces Mike in the finals and loses to Mike? Because honestly, rules dictate Mike has to win the whole thing. So, I mean, one or two things are going to happen. Either Tyler's not making the playoff finals for like the 5th year in a row, or Mike is going to win the championship. Who knows what's going to happen. But regardless, Doug, you're in 4th. And then the S class is giving gifts. And if someone can... I love stock photos sometimes because they are just the most ridiculous things. Like, I want to know what's inside that box because she is super excited. Maybe there's like a glint in her eye that's like, this could be really interesting. Or it could be like an ear from an ex-lover. I don't know what I'm about to get from this guy who is clearly a little bit crazy. Just look at the way his posture is and everything. He's insane. This is just a great picture. Moving on from all of that nonsense. We have the top 3, and we're starting off with James, because James, I believe, 100% has the singular best shot at coming in 2nd place in the fight for 50. I don't think it's even close. I think he is a lock for 2nd place for the fight for 50, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he has great players that can fall flat on their faces and completely ruin him. Maybe not completely flat on their faces, but they can definitely like stumble across the finish line for him, and he'll be like, "Great, thank you guys. I'm so glad that I had you on my team, so you can put up 0.6 points in a playoff game when I needed you to go off, and thus cost me everything." And that's what ended up happening to James last week, and I think that's going to happen to him in Week 16. Sorry, buddy, but that's just my thoughts on it. You have a lot of great players, and you're doing good things, but that's just my thoughts. And moving up to number 2. Number 2 is the person I believe 100% is my odds-on favorite for taking home the $50 at the end. It's Dave. His team is fantastic. He's got great players, top to bottom. Drew Brees is looking like Drew Brees again. Alvin Kamara looks like he's healthy now, and if he's healthy, then he's going to put up huge numbers like he has been. C.J. Anderson is a big old question mark, but hey, you have the ability to throw in Crowell because he's been actually playing well now, and then ditch him for a flex position guy. You got Kenny Britt going on. You got Kenny Britt going on, and you can always cut Adrian Peterson to pick up somebody else. I'm sure there's somebody you can put on your bench for this week just in case you need him. But yeah, you got like Luke Kuechly. Graham is also a very good defender. Barry Church you just picked up. I mean, your team is just full of absolutely fantastic players, and the fact that you have the New Orleans offense for the first week of the fight for 50 up against the Jets, it's gonna be a slaughter, and you're gonna be very, very happy that you have the team that you have. And I think you are a clear favorite for number 1 at that in that fight for 50. So congratulations, Dave. I'm calling it now. You get $50 as long as nothing bad happens. And then number 1, the person who I think currently is the odds-on favorite to win the championship, it is Gerald. And I would like to also, as I say that, congratulate Doug on winning this week after I say Gerald's the favorite because I've just been a curse all season. I mean, honestly, I shouldn't like Jerry's team because he keeps starting DeAndre Hopkins even though he's clearly regressed a bunch since he lost a good quarterback. But I'm just going to let that go for now because I've been harping on it for the last few weeks. Other players he has on his team, Devontae Freeman, who I traded him for a bunch of players that have all turned out to be just absolute trash. And he's been playing really well. So, I mean, honestly, his team has just kind of come together really, really well at a good time at the end of the season. He's putting up insanely good points week in, week out, very consistently. And yeah, I just know I can't hate on his team. It's all good from top to bottom. He's just been doing great stuff. And best of luck to you moving forward as well, Jerry. And we're going to move on to this week's matchups. As I said before, just a refresher as we close this out, we got Jerry versus Doug, Mike versus Tyler. Winners move on to the finals. Let's see how that goes. It's going to be very, very cool to watch. And then in the bottom, we have these 6 teams all duking it out for the to win the Fight 450. So let's see how that all goes as well. And the game of the week, got to give it to Mike versus Tyler because that is just going to be, I think, the closest of the 2 games that count towards the big money. So let's see how all this goes. It's going to be a good time, and I can't wait to see how everything works out. And that's it. So I will see you guys next week, and thank you so much for watching.